All right, welcome to, I guess, what we will call episode 42 of the Athletic Philosopher podcast. I am your humble host, Jordan Goldstein, at one point in life, a professor of sport history, philosophy, sociology, a little bit of psychology. They don't let me do that anymore. And honestly, I wouldn't even want to be in there anymore because we are so deep in life coaching, fitness coaching, helping people transcend themselves through the beauty of fitness, sports, and competition. I also moonlight as the tribal prof, coaching on tribal training as a sort of like a mindset performance coach for our endurance training team of regular day killers. And I'm super excited for the conversation I'm about to have today with my honored guest, Mr. Torrey Dawley. If you would just give a brief introduction of yourself, or maybe not, and then we'll get going into today's conversation. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to have you as a guest,
Me
man.
too, man. Me too. I'm stoked about this. That's quite the challenge to throw at me right off the bat, right? Like take those layers of the onion, man, and sum them up. Um, yeah, we might have to talk some point about how my favorite word in all of the English language is dynamic. So, let's see. I don't know. Father, husband, entrepreneur, artist, designer, thinker, traveler, whatever, right? So I try to not, I guess, label too much of this entity that I call myself, I suppose. But I think we talked a second before we started about this concept of independence. You know, the idea of being you and that dichotomy of you and oneness amongst the greater oneness, and like, what does that mean? What does that look like? And I can riff on that for a long time, man. So we can start. I can maybe I'll take the next however many minutes we have, and that'll give people an idea of who I am. But I can attack that subject from a number of angles.
I will literally hand over the floor directly to you so that you can do that. But let me at least explain to my audience why I wanted to have you on first, because they're probably like, what's going on?
Right.
And to be fair, if you're not expecting this by now, then you're kind of listening to the wrong show here, I think. Um, Tori is somebody who I think does an amazing job at bringing courage to people to be their authentic selves, or at least challenging the idea that they've got to fit in any one way, shape, or form. And I know that part of what you do is marketing and branding, and certainly in like the marketing and branding world, like making yourself a category of one is a very important idea when we are trying to catch the attention of potential consumers, or we're just trying to highlight the value and the benefits of whatever product or service it is that we're putting out there. And what originally gravitated me towards Story was his tag, lukewarm is death. And I am very much a proponent of living by the heart, living by passion and creativity. And we hooked up on a call, and he turned me on to a book, and I read the book, and I was like, man, we just got to talk. And what I was hoping this conversation would sort of spin around is this idea of authentic individuality. Like, where do we go to find it? How do we nurture it? Why do we want it? Why should we even desire this thing? Whatever it is. And what is the role of like fitness, athletics, competition, and training in either alerting us to who that is, or maybe in accordance, helping bring that out of us. So
Yeah,
the
man.
floor is yours.
Right on. Yeah, I mean these are big subjects, right? Yeah, maybe to help the audience, I guess a little bit, I will define some of the background a little. I mean, I began my career as a designer in 2003 after going to school to study to learn how to be a designer. Always had this sort of art background, creativity, writing in particular. I mean, writing was always my passion and kind of, cornerstone of all my creativity. And I found early in life, these sorts of passions and was really encouraged by my parents and people around me to pursue those. And so, fortunate in that respect to take that and run with it and have a pretty good idea from an early age of what I kind of wanted to do. No way I could have predicted how everything played out, of course, but it's always like step by step having options to. I'm a big proponent in this sort of approach to life as really understanding what is my next best step. Like we have to take another step. And it's not going to be the right one or the wrong one or, the best perfect thing ever. It's just always going to be, well, what's my next best step given my situation, what I'm equipped with, and what my options are. And, and especially when I coach entrepreneurs and business leaders, that's a really important concept, is look, we kind of have the cards we're dealt here for this moment. What's the next best way to play these at any given moment? And then you string that together, and eventually you lie on your deathbed and think back about all the ways you strung that together. And you say, I had a great time with this gift, right? And that's kind of the bigger overarching philosophy that I guess I've always tried to bring to the table is I try not to compartmentalize too much of any one category of my life, whether that's parenting or being a husband or being an entrepreneur, all those things I kind of named at the beginning. It's sort of like you're this spirit, you're this soul, you're this entity, you're this energy, you're this thing, and you're interacting with these other things that are like that. And despite my, feeling that that's all one thing, it sure feels disparate, right? In the moment. And we have to learn how to navigate that. And I think the games we play are just things like entrepreneurship, value creation, value exchange, again, being a parent, being a leader, being a guide, being a friend, being a husband in my case, right? Like these are just these roles that we play inside of that bigger, broader scheme. And that scheme, if you will, is to me the great gift. That's the great gift. That's this great thing we've been bestowed for whatever reason, however we got it, we have it. And we get these beautiful things called days where we get to decide what we get to do with them. And I just kind of govern my entire life built around the idea of what truly gives me maximal options in any given moment. Like, I think that's what freedom really is. Where do I have maximal choice at any given time to decide what my next best step is going to be in that moment? And the more that I can do that, the more freedom I could be said to have. And ironically, I just actually posted today, we exchanged ideas online about how constraints are your friend, right? And that if you have too much of that, or if you don't learn how to control that or harness the energy of that or play with that fire. I use the fire language a lot. You got to learn how to dance with that fire because it can warm you, it can cook your food, or it can burn your house to the ground. So anyway, these are kind of big concepts, but I've brought this to everything that I've done, from design to marketing to brand strategy, now to coaching and helping, other entrepreneurs build their businesses. Is, what can we do to sort of get the most out of our gifts and what we're choosing to do with those gifts in anybody's particular role? Marketing director, business leader, entrepreneur, solopreneur, whatever they call themselves. And we're going to just work towards getting that done.
So then, in your estimation, individuality is something like the realization or actualization of whatever these gifts are that are maybe internally embedded within us.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned that. I'm glad you kind of circled back to that. Is this a creative endeavor, or is this something that we're uncovering? And this is why we could riff out this forever. So in my brand strategy work, this was something I became intrigued by brand strategy back in the very early days. I mean, there were a couple heroes of the industry, really broke the ice for it. This is right around 2005. We were constantly telling and describing and educating, business leaders, like I have a lot of, whatever you want to call it, household global brand names on my client roster list. Okay. So like a lot of work with them and tons of work with small business owners who I love to death, and it's just everybody back then, no matter how sophisticated, quote unquote, they were in the world of marketing, you had to explain to them what brand and brand strategy was. It was like a nightmare. Now we have the opposite problem where everybody thinks they're a brand strategist and we have to go, hey, let's rein it back in here, guys. But anyway, the thing that I used to get people to understand the easiest about how brand strategy actually worked, and I'd be sitting across from these sometimes, in some cases, billionaire, executives and C-suite leaders and everything, is listen, the very first thing I tell them is, listen, I am not an architect. I'm not here to start drawing up plans and show you this grand, Parthenon or a building. I'm an archaeologist. That Parthenon is in the ground right now. It's in your culture. It's in your company. It's been entrenched here for, in some cases, decades. My job is to uncover the truth and the reality of what's really going on here culturally and with your service and with your customers and with your competition. I have to figure out what the truth actually is. And once I get that done, I can reconstruct the actual reality of what we're dealing with here, because that's what brand building really is on an institutional, organizational level for some of those clients. And what I found was it's the exact same thing on an individual level too. And I really do believe that. So I think that while there is an addendum to this where it's like, well, yeah, we do reconstruct what's there. And we do have to kind of determine how complete it is. And if it's not totally complete, then we get to add some things to that. We get to embellish it. And once it is reconstructed, if you will, you can do whatever you want with it from that point anyway. But I do think that it is an archaeological endeavor. I do. I think that we were joking about the grand cosmic vending machine of soul dispensing or whatever we wanted to call it, right? Like you're like an E7, I might be like a C, O10, and whatever those combinations are for people, right? It's like, I think that it's like that passion conversation, it's like, is it created or is it found? And I think it's both. And we could get on the subject of oscillation too. Oscillation is another gigantic concept that comes up all the time for me in business and life, in, brand strategy. It's really critical to understand how to zoom in and zoom out at the appropriate times, because perspective isn't static in life. We have to learn how to see the big picture and the details, and the real magic happens in the journey between those 2 points, not at the destinations.
Yeah, I resonate with what you're saying. And this idea of an archaeologist, I think you're speaking to the historian in me, so bravo on nailing my bias here. Bravo.
Knowing my
Um,
audience.
yeah. I think that when we think about individuality as something that is innate, kind of within ourselves, that's waiting to be revealed, I really want to highlight how that's like this realization of freedom that you were talking about. And we'll get a little bit nerdy here. I'm a former prof. To me, this is like the manifestation of the homesteading principle, where it's a mixture of nature and nurture to provide the building blocks of potential and the ability to manifest that into the world.
Yeah.
So if I am born, right, I'm born into my body, right? There are biological realities towards my potential, right? My DNA says I can only grow to be whatever, X height. Like, I'm not going to be able to transcend my DNA. Like, the proper constraint for my individuality, pardon me, might be my biology. If we're talking about this grand cosmic oneness, don't worry guys, you don't need to be with us. We're with each other and we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out all together eventually. So it's like maybe the proper constraint is my biology, which both grounds me to reality, but also provides me the ability to realize more of myself with further and further exploration inside of myself. So I think archaeologist is this beautiful term that we want to apply to ourselves, right? And I hope that people out there are appreciating Torrey's scale here, how he's able to talk about business and brand building and strategy, and then also scale it right down to the individual level. So astute listeners out there, notice the skill and the adeptness at being able to use language that way and being able to create analogies, right? And being able to create analogies. So I just have to call you out on that. So my next question then is, if we want to be able to both unearth and move ourselves towards adding into our potential, but we are constrained within the body, how does motion, movement, training of the body allow me to become a more expert archaeologist at uncovering the truth or the Parthenon that's within myself?
Yeah, what a good question, right? I mean, and you laid it out, man. I mean, our biology is our ultimate constraint, right? And epigenetics aside and all of this, that there are some things obviously that we can do to affect that, but our body's along for the ride. Like, there's nothing that we can do. I get into this a lot, so I help a lot of folks who kind of had historically fitness or fitness related or health related backgrounds, right? And there's always this sense of separation for a lot of them between the body and the mind, right? Or the body, mind, spirit, or whatever, delineation we want to put out there. But like, I constantly push them towards this, because I'm increasingly looking as a strategist going, hey, look, that market's not really viable. Like, I want you out there helping people understand the connection, exactly what you just asked, because that's, first of all, where the better opportunities are. They're not going to be, run to the ground by things like emerging AI and information, technology, technologies that bring us information at, that used to be gate kept behind people who were experts, right? Like obviously that's going to change dramatically. But then you get to folks who they want to perform at a high level. They want to have the energy, and energy is a big concept right here, right? Because that physical energy is obviously tied to your mental energy, and by the way, vice versa, right? And they are intertwined. And so I talk a lot about this concept of spirals, and the spiral is just sort of this. It's kind of a heuristic for momentum, which is another really big deal. And you talked about movement, and movement is the thing that creates momentum. And I noticed this in my own life, by the way. So, okay, so I'm landlocked in the freaking Midwest, and my soul and my spirit lives in the West. Okay, I was born in Seattle. I've traveled all of my life a lot. We're getting ready to head to New Mexico, again soon for another trip and I just feel alive in every sense of the word out there. And it's not that I don't have some things I love about here, but it's not the same thing as being able to get out into nature out there and just go. And that momentum that I can create when it's every single day out in the mountains, out on the trails, even just waking up and smelling the pines or the ocean or whatever, and having that connection with, being able to go out and just move along a beach or wherever we're staying, that movement creates mental momentum as well. And that's the thing that I've always kind of found. There was this I first kind of started really ruminating on this when, of all things, man, it was this quote from Tim Ferriss, and I think it was from one of his books, maybe podcasts, I don't remember. But somebody asked him the question of what's the best way to fix my inner game? And he said to, fix your outer game, something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but he was like, in other words, like if you want to fix your mental inner state and your energy, your focus, your positivity, your creativity, right? All of these things that we all crave and love, you got to get your body to support you in that. And it's interesting the way that that's worded, because it's, for me, and I found this too, it's easier for me to go get my body's energy moving, get its momentum going, brute force that, machine to start if I have to, and then feel the downstream effects of it pushing now my mind and its energy forward. And again, that's where that spiral idea comes in for me, where these things are intertwined. And although it's a spiral, there's multiple, ingredients. It's one entity, it's one thing. And that spiral is either traveling up or it's traveling down. And it's really difficult to see it in any other terms. And I believe that as I coach more and more, in fact, this is something I'm bringing to, this community of entrepreneurs that I've built and I'll be adding to soon. This is something that I'm going to add whenever I do this, is there will be a health component. There's going to be this exercise and physical component to it, because I just can't unlink them anymore. And we talk about it increasingly more and more all the time in my community. And I think it's really, really critical that we understand that, listen, gosh, you're getting me to reference all these things that I love, man. So like this book, this is the book that I give away the most, and I recommend everybody read it. I love it. I recommend it even more than the one I recommended to you before. And
Good.
I know. I feel really bad now. I'm like, wait a second.
Feel cheated. No,
Yeah. Well, we'll reconcile it all at once here for everybody. This book, it's a very small book. You can read it in 45 minutes to an hour, and it's really graphic. It was done by a guy named Paul Arden. He was in the advertising agency world, and he wanted it to be really visual. So it's not like you just sit down and read it in prose. There's graphics and colors and really hot, typography and everything. But it's not how good you are, it's how good you want to be. That is the title of this little book. Paul Arden, Arden. It's the gift. I gift it all the time. All my students get it. I send it to people all the time. I'll send you one. So we'll talk offline about this, and that's how you get your copy. In the book, one of the primary messages he has right away when he talks about embarking on anything great, if you have any aspirations for doing anything novel, great, unusual, above average, etc., and it doesn't matter what the endeavor is. He comes again from an advertising creative kind of entrepreneurial bend. I don't care what it is. It could be racing, and jogging, running, and lifting, whatever. The idea, he shows a picture, and I'll spoil this particular, page, but it's a picture of all things, a nuclear explosion, the Bimini Island, not Bimini Island,
Yep.
whatever,
Yep.
Bikini Atoll, like one that they tested in the Pacific or whatever.
Yep.
And it just says in big words, energy.
Oh, yeah.
And it says, if you haven't got it, he's British, so this is the way he words it. If you haven't got it, be nice. In other words, you're going to have to learn how to get along with a lot of people, because they're going to be telling you what to do for the rest of your life. And if you don't, so in other words, energy is your ticket to being able to carve out life on your terms. And I don't know how you can separate that from that physical presence and momentum that you talk about just perfectly, as far as I'm concerned, in the way that you can intertwine these together.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I love this idea of mental momentum. I love I love this idea, and now you're giving me the spiral and the oscillation between the physical and the mental when it comes to motion. And I also am with you in terms of direction. The idea of stasis is an illusion. There is no such thing as coasting or plateauing. It may just be a momentary pause before you resume your direction. I don't just get to stand still. Like,
Completely
if
agree.
you want to stand still, guess what? The earth still spins you around. And it spins you faster than you can even comprehend, so that it doesn't even feel like you're spinning at all. Funny how that paradox
It is, isn't it?
works, how it works so well. Um, and I really appreciate the way you are drawing this out. But I would love to further this idea of mental momentum. Like, this is the thing that I'm fascinated by. How does increasing my physical energy, let's say in terms of exercise, like the studies are out, doing exercise gives you energy. Like, it's not the opposite. It's not, oh, I'm drained because I worked out. It's like, oh, I worked out, so now I get more. Like, when I work out, I get more energy. I get more capacity to do more things. How does more physical energy translate to mental momentum to be courageous enough to bring out my individuality? And when I say individuality, you sort of mentioned it a little bit there, where it's like, I want to be great. I want to be above average. If I'm an individual, by almost definition, it means I'm being set apart by other people, right? I'm not just normal. I'm not just average. This thing is a differentiation. It's a
Hmm.
differentiation. So I would love for you to add courage into all this. Courage, self knowing, and the ability now to take energy. Let's say I'm going to the gym 3 times a week and I wasn't going to the gym at all. How do I take that physical energy, move it to mental energy, and then find courage to say, hey, world, I'm an individual. Here I am.
I mean, I think the answer's in the simplicity of the formula you just created, man. I mean, first of all, the energy happens because that's physiologically what is going to happen once you start moving, once you start working in that way. I mean, I will say maybe some of my leg days would like to, put a little bit of pushback on your, I feel more energy afterwards. But other than that, I
Maybe
told
not
you
through
before,
your leg muscles
I
specifically,
was
but
going to
your
say,
body is like,
uh,
I found something, and then you go to move your legs. You're like,
oh,
oh, but the
totally.
legs, they don't.
When you feel if if you skip leg days, I mean that's the clincher right there, right? What was that? Was it Rogan, the great, he's commentating all the time on MMA or whatever, right? And he would say it's the leg size. He always look at leg size to predict who is going to win, right? It's
Yeah,
like there's something about that.
it's a good heuristic.
Oh yeah, and it's like 99% effective, right? Not to mention, for the record, that's actually, there's tons of science behind that in terms of longevity, quality of life later on, especially when bone density and muscle loss and things like that start kicking as you get older. But in terms of this energy, this interplay between that physical energy, like you're muster, maybe it takes mustering that mental energy to just, it's, dude, the great, speaking of marketing and advertising, the greatest tagline of all time is Nike's "Just Do It." Okay, and I'm obviously on the bandwagon with this, but it's very obvious because it's this sense of, I know it sucks, I know you don't want to, I know you don't feel like it, but you just have to do it. And it's this idea of, if you brute force the action in that, and this is, by the way, this is a courageous act in and of itself, for the record. That person who needs to lose 20, 30, 50 pounds, whatever, who gets their self out the door to move at all, that is an act of courage, and we should look at it that way. I think society and all of us together, I think we need to be celebrating that consistently. But regardless, like, once you get that into motion and put your body through those motions, your body's craving that, it needs that. And I think if I'm my first thought when you asked it that way, the word that popped into my head was integrity.
No.
There's
Let's
this
go.
there's this sense, and I really, I sometimes I got to be careful with it, because it's like, I don't want to sound preachy. I've got work to do. We all have work to do. I've got targets I'm
Certainly.
working towards, all that stuff. But that's all that matters. Are you working towards what matters? I think that we get so fixated on this idea of finish lines and goals in our society, especially bank account numbers, what car you drive, what address you have, and where you live, and these are all these like destinations that become status symbols outwardly. And that is nonsense to me. I respect and I admire the people who are actively getting up every single day and working towards the thing they actually really truly want. That's the thing, that it's in the process, it's in the act of working every single day towards it, because that's the reality of life, right? It's like I could start quoting the Tao, and I'm not going to get into it. We could talk about that. I'm just going to go down rabbit hole after rabbit hole if I'm not careful. But it just reminded me of this sense, of like that's the naming of the particular things. That's
Yeah.
the thing that's
Yeah.
the label we give to the thing
Yeah.
that we think it is. It's not that. It's never that. It was always something else, but we don't have words for it. Anyway, but this integrity idea for me is like your body and your mind know. And if you're not bringing yourself to the table to say, I'm trying to put myself in the best possible position to at least have a healthy relationship with my body, it's almost like I look at that. And again, this is that duality where you feel like it's separate. It's not separate. It's really a relationship with yourself. And you don't have to be a freaking marathoner. You don't have to go out powerlifting or whatever. I don't think it's any of that. I think, are you working towards doing the things that make you feel better and make you feel stronger and make you feel more in control? Because if you know deep down, consciously or subconsciously, that you don't even have control over your own body, right? That you're starting to feel the negative downstream effects of poor circumstances or choices or any of the things, I'm not necessarily even saying it's like, I think we get way too like puritanical about it, of like there's some sort of moralistic thing there. I think that's ridiculous. But nevertheless, there's a sense of, I could be making this better and it would put me at a, it would be advantageous for me, but I'm not. And I don't think you can live long in that world before that is like a stain that starts to spread into other things in your life. And I'll kind of maybe wrap it up with this. And I know I want to get back to the courage idea. That's not to say that I believe in this sentiment. You've heard this, Navalism or whoever says it, that like how you do anything is how you do everything. I don't believe that at all. I've never believed that. I've never bought into that. Some of the best and most incredible creative artistic minds that I know who are just absolutely top of the food chain are like way out of shape in their physical side or their relations or their, marriages or whatever. Like there's all kinds of train wrecks, we could see the Jack kid at the gym doing awesome and his, relationships are terrible. Like I don't believe that at all. I think that we only have certain amounts of bandwidth for, let's call it excellence, right? But with that said, I do think we have to pay attention in our life to calibrating a set of standards for those things that we
Yeah.
know are going to affect the rest of our life. I don't think you can call yourself free if you're a prisoner to a body that's failing you, right? Like that's a big problem to me. I don't think you can call yourself free if your opportunities are dwindling because you're not putting the free time into learning more or building your network or whatever, right? Like this is limiting your choices, which is the opposite of
Yeah.
that freedom moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I really appreciate how you're framing this, and I think generally it gives us a sense of actually why like paying attention to health might actually be a moral activity. Like, what's better, bad health or good health? Good health is better than bad health. So therefore, the actions that move me, generally speaking, towards good health, we can term as good, and the ones that generally speaking move me to bad health, those are bad. But I'm an individual. I'm not a general apparition. Like I'm not a shadow, and you can't just put me next to some other shadow and say we're the same. Like I'm an individual. So it more then comes down to like, well, what does good health look like for me? What does bad health look like for me? Where am I currently? What's the next best step? What's the next worst step? And if I
Yes.
can just endeavor to find the courage to take the next best step as often as I can in all these endeavors, well, that's going to reveal to me the good and the goodness of my own particular specific circumstances and life. So while we don't want to be preachy in terms of what the individual should do, there are some general patterns of good and bad that we do want to conform to. This would further the idea of the right constraints upon action or chaos, providing the breeding ground for the realization of freedom and autonomy and individuality. Um,
Well said.
so, so appreciate it. We got a lot of good articulation going on both microphones here. So then the next, I guess, question, or one of the next questions, how does how does corresponding to a general pattern of the good reveal the particular good for an individual? Right? And I want to couch this in maybe just the fitness terms, but it's a general question because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to extrapolate down from a general principle down to your specific life and how you as a specific individual can go about realizing this stuff. because otherwise we're just talking about concepts and there's no reason to share this with anybody.
Yeah, you're gonna back me into a corner because you're gonna find out like my duality in my head is always like this stark contrast. And I guess this is the height of irony for anybody who again is kind of more versed in
We're just a big. I'm a big paradox respecter, so all
oh
this is
good.
good.
Thank God
I'm
for
a big.
that.
If you don't want to, if you here's another thing. If you're listening to this and you don't like paradoxes, you should probably stop listening to
Yeah,
this.
right, exactly. Well, it's a
This is a paradox respecting podcast.
perfect. I love it. That should be the official bumper sticker. So you're getting my marketing mind going.
Yeah, I should just rebrand.
Man, it's from the Tao. I mean, it is from the Tao. It really is. Anybody who hasn't explored the Tao Te Ching and some of the things that come from that, way of thinking, they really need to and should. I'll just say it that way. It's very uncharacteristic for a Taoist, sympathizer to say that, but whatever. But
Off a paradox in and of itself.
I could just keep again, yeah, layer upon, whatever, darkness within darkness, right? That's the idea. So the idea, for me, it's like I get caught between that nature of that duality, right? So in paradox and duality are kind of one and the same to me. And I think that on one hand, there's this sense of like the Tao is ambivalent. It's inexhaustible, right? You can use it for whatever you want. It can be used for good. It can be used for bad. It can be used for anything. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily dictate between what it is that you're going to necessarily use it for. That's the idea. And yet at the same time, you have to be able to form, again, it's morals, it's standards. And I think of those as math. Like this for me is very simple. And I talk about this a lot with my students. Now we get to the duality, which is math, right? So this is like hard, fast rules. There's no wishy-washy trout in the stream analogies at all. It's just a very simple thing. And this is something I get fixated on. And I just ask very simply for people. I'm like, what is your desired outcome? What do you want? What is your desired outcome? And I say what desired outcome because when you ask somebody what they want, that's very ethereal, right? So I ask like, in this moment, in this scenario, in this particular subject matter, let's call it health, fitness, the ability to do whatever it is, what is your desired outcome? And very few people are going to tell you, I want more time on the couch, accumulating more body fat and feeling generally worse, right? They're just not, right? And the point is, I'm not giving them the formula, the math yet. I'm just asking them it's like running a proof. It's like, I already know the answer. You define that for me. It's like, I want to feel better. I want to feel happier. I want to feel more general positivity. I want to actually feel the energy of waking up in the morning and wanting to get after it. I would love to be able to join my friends in some of these other things. I would love to feel more clarity in the moment when I need to think in terms of, negotiation in a meeting or whatever, right? Like, what are these desired outcomes that we'd actually want? I actually don't think we spend a lot of time really thinking about that. For all of this like consumerism and like, constantly being inundated with desires in our culture or whatever, I actually don't think that's true. I think there's a massive difference between having your desires implanted in you by all these external forces and you actually having the inner burning fire to drive towards something you deeply want. Those aren't the same thing. We should have different words for these. Yeah. And so when I frame it around desired outcome, that helps me to determine, okay, what is it we're talking about? What is it we actually want? So let's get specific about this and say, and it can be anything. In this case, let's talk about health and energy, right? Okay, well, now we got to start working backwards on the math of that. What does that look like? It's like a hand of cards or whatever. What cards do we have dealt? You're a parent or you're not. You're married or you're not. You have a job or you're not. You're commuting or you're not. You have a gym membership or you don't. All of these different things. You might have a disability. You might have some sort of thing that precludes your ability to get out there and just start at full throttle. Whatever. I don't care. But normally what we find is what we really have is a collection of stories. We have a collection of stories we're telling ourselves. The reality isn't the cards. This is back into the Tao thing. We're not looking at the cards themselves. We're actually looking at the stories that we started telling about the cards. We don't even remember what the cards are now, right? And it can be the story of when I was a kid, I was told constantly, wait till you have kids. I was told constantly when I was younger, wait till you get older. You won't feel that way, right? You get all these stories, all these different backgrounds from people versus imagine growing up around an empowered tribe, an empowered family who says like, it only gets better. We only get better as we get along and more energy. We only push for greater and greater things as we accumulate more knowledge, more network, more skills, right? Like that's the difference because now we got these stories around us to support us when we start deconstructing, well, what is my desired outcome? What do I want? And what tools do I have available to make that happen? And I think that's where people like us come in. I really do, because most people have very similar desired outcomes. Most people aren't going to tell you crazy things, right? There's 95 percentile, congruity here. And you're basically going to be able, though, from that point forward to go, well, now let's take a look at what your cards actually are. And let's start to play those cards. So maybe that workout set looks different. Maybe your style of, wanting to do cardio versus weights or whatever. Maybe you have access to mountain trails or you live in the hellhole of the cloudy Midwest like I do. Like what are the things that we have at our disposal? Yeah, get me started on the Ohio Valley, dude. So anyway, that's the stuff that we have to deal with, and that's something, I mean, we're talking about health and physical stuff. I mean, I'll be very transparent right here for you. A month ago, I got some data, health data coming back from some tests that I did not want to see. And I have been I would call myself a relatively active, healthy individual who I have a home gym. I commit to it a lot. We work out all the time. We travel, we hike, we do all this stuff. And I was shocked to see what I saw. And since then, I have gone down the full-blown rabbit hole because I defined what I want my desired outcome to be, which is to be healthy, alert, fully energetic, present for my children, for my wife, until I finally, come to my time to check out of here, determined by the grand, owner of that cosmic vending machine, right? So like whatever that is, I'm going to give it full throttle to put myself in the best possible position. And that required me changing some of the workouts and structures that I did. And what's been very interesting is I'm starting to see the downstream positive effects of some of this new, in this case, a lot more cardio, that I hadn't tasted before. And I'm starting to get into where I remember when I was back in my, triathlon training days, younger, youth, I'm starting to get that taste again of that sort of like upward spiral of like, holy cow, I kind of feel I'm a little fired up today, like you feel that coming back to you, and that's all great. But again, I got a card that I was dealt that I was not happy about. Fine. I'm not folding the hand. We're going to play that bad boy. I just got to switch my strategy a little bit.
There's so many good things about this. I'm going to leave the mat part out for a second. But that's a very important part of this. That's an incredibly important part of this. And what gives sports, I believe, their unique power when we're thinking about things like self-knowing, individuality, corresponding to the truth of reality. The measurements of sports are what grounds the experience so that I can actually utilize it. I can actually, because it's not an illusion. It's not some sort of a figment of my mind, which is powerful enough to warp reality, right? And so I need the blunt harshness of the numbers of sport, of the bar, of the clock, to sync up my experiences and be congruent with the world. So the math part is extremely important. But when I'm thinking about how do I extrapolate a general principle to a specific principle, you answered, number one, people don't even know what the specific thing is that they want. So then whatever is in between those two things is being projected into them or embedded in them. So when people think even just about health and fitness, that looks like, well, my body falls apart. I have to go to the gym to prevent it from falling apart once I become an adult.
Right.
And that's how most people's frame of health and fitness, like thinking about like, well, what's my individual relationship to health and fitness? It's just the general. Because I haven't defined what that looks like for me. And without the definition, without having it be explicit, it's not real. And the only thing I have is to substitute what everybody else is doing.
Exactly.
But that leads to drifting, meaninglessness, no purpose, no direction, no way to actualize the individual within yourself. And so you actually, I don't know if you were meaning to do this with your narrative or not, but you gave everybody the answer. You gave everybody a beautiful illustration of how they should be doing it. So we've got a general principle. Better to be healthy than not healthy. You have individualized values which you've articulated to yourself and which you have held consistent for more or less like your entire life, right? Kudos to you. And then all of a sudden reality comes in and we get the correspondence. Oh shoot, maybe my heart's not as robust as I thought it was. That's like going into the gym and trying to lift up the barbell and saying, oops, don't have enough bicep strength today to make it happen. Oh darn, like I'm trying to go sub 7 on my mile time. Oops, it's 7:02.
Yep.
Not good enough. Got to do something else. And then you take the general and fit it into your specific value structure to then take the next best step for yourself. And that looks like I've been doing these exercises. I should probably modify, adapt, and change to these ones. And effectively, you're getting positive feedback from the universe with this increased energy and confidence and self knowing and recovering. You're now the archaeologist on yourself with this new, focus on cardio. It's like, oh, I'm remembering back when I used to do, I'm being reborn again
Right.
in a new, better fashion that's more appropriate to where I am in my life and is going to allow me to take more better steps, best steps forward. Like you've opened up the potentiality of all these different steps that you can take, which all lead to this better place, which are all congruent and correlated to your own reality. But that's not possible if you don't have an individualized conception of yourself in the first place with highly articulated values that are specifically related to you. So
Dude, you
thank you. It was brilliant. I don't know if you meant to do that in real
uh
time or not, but it was amazing.
I can't, I'm not, I don't even want to like add anything to this. Like you fired my brain off into like four very like specific and very useful directions. And I'm like, but this was like, you even circled back to the original, you've basically completely taken the theory of everything and compiled it into one beautiful little package bow.
You also gave me a time constraint, so I'm
Yeah,
doing my
that's true
best.
too. There's also
I'm
that.
doing my best to work within the time constraint because I
It's,
want to have some concluding thoughts, and we romanticized the way that this could end with Tori being like, "You totally mismanaged time, and I gotta go," and then I'm literally here like I just got hung up on by my own podcast guest, which would be fun, but I don't know if we want to do that today.
no, 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 no. You landed the plane perfectly, brother. I think there's, you know what? I will say one thing that you made me think of, as
Yeah,
beautiful as
please.
all that is, and it fits right in with what you said. Um, Sometimes it can be difficult to actually define or know exactly what that desired outcome might be or is, or to be able to put
Great point.
like let's say I don't know, I'm in a wonderful happy marriage with the love of my life of a woman. So like pretend you are somebody who wants to get married. You're not going to be able to predict exactly who that person is going to be, right? Like that's not the desired outcome. Is I need that person to be. There's certain things we don't control. Right. What you have to do is you have to figure out, no, what am I really looking for? What I want is a marriage that gives me these things. You have to define those things. And sometimes even that can be difficult to define. And that's when and again, this is kind of a business analogy too, that I run into this a lot with business. And this is where I kind of back up to, okay, well, let's talk about what's directionally correct. And this is going to put a little bit of a bow on what you talked about before with the what's more good and what's less good. Right? Like it's that idea. Like we don't have to get stuck necessarily in this full blown moralism of it all. We can just look at it and say, look, if this is generally good, I know this is generally beneficial. This is generally positive. This is generally good for me. You know, if I keep doing this way and I know that these things are generally bad, generally negative, generally destructive, then at least I can start to say to myself, am I willing to wake up today, tomorrow, whatever, and say, I'm going to take the steps that are generally good. That's it. I don't know necessarily where the destination is. It's this analogy of driving with your headlights at night from LA to New York. You can get there and only see 100 yards ahead of yourself the whole time, as long as you just know it's east. and you know, that's that generally correct idea. And I think that helps sometimes for people who get really stuck, because one of the
Yeah.
things that's so beautiful about the universe and about, you know, again, the cosmic vending machine and all that, when you do that, you build that momentum that we talked about. And while you're building that momentum, other people start to join. This is the beauty of it. It brings people and energy into your life and they help you find the clarity. And that is so freaking important. And when you think about
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like
yeah.
business journeys for people, man,
Yeah.
that's messy. It's the messiest game you could ever play, I swear. Parenting is up there too, I guess. But like, you know, at least you got to witness your parents try that. With business, a lot of people
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
even have that, you know. So
Yeah.
I talk about that a lot too. So that's the only thing,
Mhm.
just to not discourage anybody who's like, but I don't know yet. You know, it's like, look, that's okay. You don't have to
Yeah.
wait. You can just start to get in the general direction.
That's perfect. That's exactly kind of where I wanted to land
I
this
queued you
this
up.
on
Let's
is
go.
the idea of the headlights going from California to New York. Yeah, there's an marathoner in there that needs to be archaeologized out of you
That
because
might be a
that's the
better one.
running mentality. Is eventually it's just I only have my feet and the next step because if I try to think about anything else, I'm going to jump off the mountain and end this experience like in totality because it's all too great for me.
Shut the whole thing down.
Holy, and people are just like, you're being dramatic. I'm like, well, you get to mile.
uh, yeah.
Tell me, please.
Seriously.
Something like that, right?
It's awesome.
So I would love for you to be able to give the audience some advice, something that they can do to start crafting out their own individualized core values. Because it's something I was talking with some of my guys this morning about, and it's a constant theme of what are your values? Articulate your values, make them explicit, make them known. Look at like be able to see them and then have that vision now direct those best step, better step, good step, worst step.
Yeah.
So, is there some way that you can help people out there who are struggling to know, yeah, I want to live as an individual. Yeah, I want to be authentic and genuine. The first step is this articulation of your particular values. So, in your kind of like expert opinion on this, you've done it for brands, but
Right.
you also mentioned brands are individuals in a sense, right?
Right.
What's the advice for the people out there? How can they go start crafting their own values and then living by them?
I love that you give me 90 seconds to answer one of the biggest questions in all
I
of
never
branding.
said it was going to
Thank
be
you.
fair.
Thank
I
you,
never
Jordan.
said it was going to be fair.
Man,
You're going to help somebody in this 90 seconds.
I hope so.
You're going to help somebody.
I'll try.
That's all that
I
matters.
will do my best, which is all I can promise. You bring up two cornerstone concepts for me. Okay. So first of all, like the basis of all of my brand and brand strategy work does begin with vision, values, beliefs, getting down to the core of that thing that people have lost touch of. And on an organizational level, you see it all the time, but on a personal level is what I'm going to talk about right now. I think it's absolutely critical that you do start to think deeply about those things and to understand that it is an archaeological pursuit. You can't just wish it into existence. What I will say is there are some times and some methods that you can use when you find things you aspire to. So if you surround yourself with powerful people, and they don't have to be living, you don't have to know them, they can be anybody, you can create a sort of external persona feeling, right? Of like, I want to live up to this kind of standard. And say it is a human that you know, it's like, okay, well, I project onto that person that they live up to these three things. They seem to be dedicated, disciplined, hardworking, whatever. Okay, well, then be like them every day. Live up to their standard the best you can until it becomes your own standard. I've got this whole thing on 5 stages being, we can't get into it right now.
No.
But that you can hijack that system to live up
Yes.
to that values. You don't have to necessarily go, well, what's the truth in here? And my contention is you're just kind of testing the system until something feels right. And then it's like, hey, guess what you just pulled out of the earth? That's that thing inside you that you just found it by using that mechanism of external sort of living up to something else at the time. And then the second is the most common form of advice I have given to creative professionals my entire career. I've worked with thousands of artists in my career, and this is the advice I've given to them most. And it's very simple. It's this. If you believe them when they say it's good, you have to believe them when they say it's bad. And my contention has always been, don't believe them at all. If you want to live as a radical individual, like radically individualized as a human and fully, developed, you have got to learn how to stop accepting praise from people so that you can train yourself to stop accepting the criticism from people, because they're two doors into the same room and you don't get to decide that in your brain. And there's a tiny little asterisk to this, but I'm going to leave it as a cliffhanger for the end of the conversation, because I believe that if most people just lived by that standard, and most artists, when they do take my advice and run on this, they're like, again, speaking of reborn, they're like a new human within a year of practicing that.
You talking about giving 90 seconds or whatever. That's not
tried.
fair what you just did to me. Good man. Way to reciprocate. We're oscillating here. We're oscillating.
There it is.
Rather than go down the whole ego discussion, we'll pause there and we'll talk about the ego's role in all this stuff maybe a little bit later. But I just want to piggyback on the first thing that you mentioned. One of the things that I've gotten people to do in the past, which is that exact exercise, if you're trying to think about like, well, who should I graft these ideas onto? How about athletes? How about the athlete you love? How about the athlete you idolize? The athlete you're like, that person is the one that inspired me when I was a kid to be great or excellent.
Right.
Take that. For me, it's like Patrick Waugh or Ken Griffey Jr. Those are the two guys that I usually go.
Dude, I love it. Those two are on my list.
Steal virtues from the athletes.
Yeah,
The athletes are there for us as representational models and symbols of virtue in action through discipline. So steal it from them.
totally.
Great starting point. Man, this was super fun. I am so grateful for your time, Tori. I hope
Likewise,
everybody out
brother.
there enjoyed our conversation. If you are in the business world and you need anything to do with branding or strategy or marketing, this is clearly the guy, obviously. So I'll link to you in the show notes. We will hopefully help more people together. And yeah, I've got a book in the mail coming my way, don't I?
Yes, you do, sir. We will follow up
Yeah.
on that.
This was great. Thank you so
Appreciate you
much.
so much, man.
I appreciate you. This was one of my most favorite conversations of all time.
Dude,
Not just
likewise.
podcast or non-podcast, just like you and I, we have a lot to talk about.
Yes, we
So
do.
I
We'll
appreciate.
be conducting that, sir. This will happen
Yeah, yeah,
again.
yeah. I appreciate everybody for listening, and I will get Tori out with. He said 10 seconds. We're gonna do him a little bit better. We're gonna do about 40 seconds. All right. Peace and love to everybody out there. Catch you in the next one.